New strategic outline for Tesla. Tesla is in a tough spot right now because they're transitioning from a car company to a service company. What that means in practice is that with FSD close to maturing and Robotaxi possible from a technological perspective, the company is repositioning itself to become a service provider of transport. Whether that's going to be a pure taxi service or some hybrid form, that remains to be seen. But we expect Tesla to announce certain strategic changes, but more importantly, start changing its long-term planning strategically towards becoming a software-defined company and not a mass-producing car company. This is very fundamental. We believe that that's the reason why Drew Ballino resigned. We believe that that's going to create a lot of turmoil within the company because this is literally the Titanic changing course and becoming a speedboat. For us investors, this means a little bit more risk, maybe a lot more risk, a lot more upside, a lot more potential. And to paraphrase a scene from the movie Heat, when De Niro's character sits down and has coffee with Pacino's character, and De Niro's character tells the Pacino character, if your job is to follow guys like me and you have to move when I move, then how can you keep a marriage? And the Pacino character laughs at this. And I'm using this as an analogy to our situation as investors. If we have to move when Elon Musk moves, then how can we keep a normal life? This has been the case for the last decade of us investing in Tesla. It's the price to pay for not just wealth creation, but also for creating something incredibly exciting and new. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but it also takes a lot of patience. Tesla is changing its strategy. Tesla is changing the nature of the company. We're going to elaborate what we mean with that. We're going to give some outline in how we think this is going to play out. And most importantly, also, we're going to explain why we think the ingredients are there for that to happen. This is not even on podcast. It's April 16, 2024. This is Crim Telco. For the day, the fund is down 1.2%. The market is flat. For the year, we are down 24.6%. The market is up 5.4%. We're underperforming by 30%. There is in strategy for Tesla. We expect Tesla to announce from morphing we expect Tesla to announce to morph from a mass-producing electric car company, an energy company, into an energy company and a transport service company. In practice, that means that they're going to build something akin to robotaxis, whether that is a pure play robotaxi or some hybrid, we'll see. But they're going to switch from trying to sell as many cars as they can to replace the car fleet towards moving people away from buying cars per se and having people use transportation services through robots or robotaxis. What is a robotaxi? A robotaxi is a self-driving car or a self-drive that is orderable and drives from A to B, can wait for people. You can hire it for a day, you can hire it for an hour, you can hire it per trip, you can hire it for a month, you can even buy it. So there's a lot of spectrum here. We expect a business model similar to AWS, so a cloud transport company. You have a large provider of hardware that is providing transport on demand. That is the fundamental shift. So we have a company that is, in the name of Tesla, that has had a mission for the last 15 years to accelerate the advent of sustainable energy and sustainable transportation and autonomy. That was the mission, roughly. I might be paraphrasing it, not fully, but but that's kind of the mission. And I think the mission stays the same: accelerate the advent of sustainable energy and transport. It's just that the means of how they want to achieve this are changing. And they're changing because there is a new technology available, which is full self-driving. That's new. This is a GPT moment for real world AI. There is a robot in the name of Tesla and the FSD, which is able to navigate in the wild on its own. It's not fully there yet. I'm driving it right now, and occasionally I have to intervene. There are some, you know, not last mile, but last meter type problems to be solved. So if I get to my house, how do I actually get to my parking spot? How do I pick up my child from the school at the exact location where it's supposed to stand, where he's supposed to stand? I would say call it the last meter problem. It has to be solved. There's some parking issues. There's certainly stuff that can be. So we're still probably a year or two away, but I would say the big problem has been solved, which is navigating in a very complex city type environment. That has been solved, and therefore we are now at the cusp of having the availability of robotaxis. And with that, Tesla is changing its strategy because the the goal of Tesla is to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport and energy, or let's just call it transport for a second. Okay, let's call it sustainable transport. And what that means is we want to have less emissions. We want to have less cars on the road. We want to have less people consuming energy in the name of buying a car or also by using a car. Now that can be achieved in sort of, let's say, Tesla 1.0 was, okay, we want to do the same thing like everybody else is doing, which is we want to produce and sell a car, but let's make that car more efficient. That's what Tesla's been doing for the last 15 years. Very successfully, best-selling car, best-selling everything, millions of cars being produced, millions of cars on the road, all of that, very, very interesting. Produce the machine that builds the machine, efficient manufacturing, all of these things have been achieved and they are in play. Now, the next phase, Tesla 2.0, is actually get people to not buy cars anymore, get people to consume transportation the way it's meant to be consumed, which is, look, I just need to go from A to B. There's always going to be space for people that want to do road trips with their own car, a little bit like people still owning horses, people still, want to take a horse on a nice ride on a beach versus doing a four-wheeler on the beach. I mean, there's always going to be that kind of stuff, right? But the masses, the big masses around the world, particularly in the developing world, also in Asia, where there's the most population, they are going to consume transportation first, and then they're going to consume entertainment in the form of owning a car and things like that. So for the transportation side, there is we believe the AWS analogy is actually really good. Like same with AWS. So AWS is cloud computing. It solves the problem of software on demand, hardware on demand, memory on demand, storage on demand, all kinds of stuff on demand. There's still a lot of people that own their own devices, that store their devices on premise and all of that stuff. But the bulk of the business and the growth of the business and the wealth creation of the business has been in the cloud side. That's the way we see transportation happening. And the reason we see that happening right now is just like we said, because the technology is available. Like it's there. We have it in front of our eyes. It's a very exciting technology, which is full self-drive. If you want a more general description of full self-drive, it is, intelligent, embodied intelligence in the wild. It has solved navigation so far, so we haven't solved things like grasping and factory work and things like that. So there's still a lot of room for robots to conquer. And whether Tesla is going to go down that route also, that remains to be seen. But for now, what we see is a strategic shift. Tesla is going from selling cars to providing transport on demand. This is the key change. That's why we think Dubalino has resigned, because the future of the company, the kinds of problems that need to be solved are going to be AI, software, service type problems. It's not a production, efficiency, powertrain type problem anymore. There's still a lot of infrastructure to be built for that. For example, we need a million-mile car for that because one way to drive down costs in a robotaxi setting is one is of course to get rid of the driver, which we have. That is 80% of the cost, but then we'll also have cost per mile coming down by driving a lot more miles with a car that doesn't need a lot of maintenance. So a battery that can last on a battery that has a certain amount of range. We could see, for example, we could see a change in strategy also that maybe the range doesn't have to be as long for the robotaxi, right? Maybe Tesla is even shifting away from having long or 300-400 mile type ranges towards 100-mile ranges because that might be enough for a robotaxi to do its job. Although you might argue that probably the most efficient way for the robotaxi to operate would be to charge while it's also being cleaned, because cleaning is something that, so excuse me, I'm just using FSD. It just stopped for no particular reason. People were crossing the street. There's still fine tuning to be done. I just drove from my surf spot in Half Moon Bay to Stanford with zero interventions on a relatively complicated road, particularly Stanford, the campus with stops and bikes and pedestrians and all kinds of stuff going on here. So back to the podcast episode. So we have this shift in strategy, and like I was saying, there's still a lot of problems to be solved in the sort of, I call it the Drew Balino space. So it's not a foregone conclusion that somebody like Drew would leave the company, but I could think that in combination with his desire, with understandable desire to be the successor in chief here, in a sense that he is the person that should be CEO once Musk decides to step down. I'm not so sure anymore if that's a good idea, simply because you have a different problem set. And we spoke about this yesterday, the keeper test, the Netflix keeper test, which kind of puts any person from CEO all the way down to the factory worker in a position where they constantly have to ask themselves, am I the right person for the job? And is the job the right job for me? And in the case of Drew Balino, the answer is no, not anymore. That's not because of his shortcoming or laziness or anything like that. He's a great person and he's going to be missed. But the problem set of the company is changing. And we believe that his resignation, together with some other stuff, the rumors that Tesla is giving up on the $25,000 car, then the tweet by Musk that there's going to be a reveal of the Robotaxi. All these things add together to a concept that we believe makes sense, which is that we're going to see an announcement that Tesla is focusing on Robotaxi. Now let's talk a little bit about Robotaxi. So Robotaxi requires a couple of things. One, and most important, of course, it is the technology itself, the full snapdragon technology. But that's just the beginning. I mean, the fun just starts there. We also have a whole slew of design problems to be solved, right? Like what kind of car or what kind of vehicle actually is a robotaxi, in a sense? What's the interior going to look like? What's the exterior going to look like? What kind of entertainment is it going to? So is it going to be an office on wheels? Is it going to be what this is? I mean, this is Franz von Holthausen playground here, which I think is very exciting. We need engineering solutions. A car without steering wheel, a car. What kind of interventions do we still allow? How do we train this vehicle that is fundamentally going to be trained on a premise not to have a driver? So there's definitely some fundamental changes here, and I don't want to anticipate too much because we don't know how these things are going to pan out. But here's what's really important for us at Orange Capital Partners, right? First and foremost, we have to decide, do we still want to be part of this rodeo? Because while this is super exciting, it's a different type of company. Let's not forget, this is a different type of company. Now, for us, the answer is yes, because the mission is still the same. It's not changing. It's just the way that the advent of sustainable energy will be achieved is by keeping people out of the dealer room, right? You're not even buying the car anymore. You're buying it on premise, excuse me, on demand, like you're doing with, with AWS. So I think cloud computing is a good analogy here. And you'll have a lot more miles driven by fewer cars, more more utilization, and much better network utilization. You'll have much better traffic solutions. It's going to take a while, but we could see a city, even at the size of New York or LA or San Francisco, switching pretty fast because it's really much better now. uh, we'll have this hybrid situation with owners still wanting to drive around. So there's examples like Singapore or even New York City, where most of the cities are already taxi cabs. And what you're going to do now is just change them into robotaxis. The technology is available. That's important. But again, the problem set now is changing from being sort of hardware manufacturing, mass manufacturing, efficiency, range, all these things that mattered for Tesla for the last 2 decades, now are switching into AI and also design a robotaxi. That's in itself a very interesting problem. Are you going to invest in connectivity? For example, because people want to use it as an office or video game. We could see those two applications, so work and play, basically, as the most relevant in-car activities, because the driving falls away, and with the driving falling away, lots of other things fall away too. We might still see, single persons using cars because over the last decades, that has proven to be the best usage of transport. It's individual transport. It's just, this whole carpooling thing, it has only brought us to a certain extent, uh, given us something, but the real solution is again much more efficient network utilization and single point transport. So each person, my son has his own needs. I have my own. My wife has her needs. Like everybody has their own individual transportation needs. So the best is to solve that by having individual transport offerings, which can be done with a robotaxi, because the robotaxi can drive, theoretically probably, uh, you know, eight 8x more. If we take 2 hours per day, which is usually what people drive on average, let's say 3 hours. So between 2 and 3 hours, it's between 8 and 10 times the driving that can be done per day. And then that means that you can reduce the carpool by maybe 50%, because yes, you drive 10 times more, but you also have more driving because it's becoming much cheaper. So we have less emissions, less everything, less. Just to end this episode, maybe I also want to say a few things about the situation Tesla is in right now. Currently, we have some problems with volume growth. We have margin issues, things along those lines. And I think the best way for Tesla to rid itself from this typical car market headache is to not be in the car market in the first place. When we started investing in Tesla back in the early 2010s, people, the naysayers, told us, "You're crazy. The car business is the worst business in the world. You don't want to invest in this thing. It's like the airline business. Whenever somebody makes a little bit of money, everybody else steals the margin." And to some extent, unfortunately, that turns out to be true. It's true at a very high level, at a very luxury level. Tesla is now 500 billion in market cap, but it's still kind of true in a sense that this is not like a software business. So what Tesla can do to solve this car crux type situation is simply not to be a car company anymore and to become a transportation company, very similarly to Amazon. Imagine if Amazon had wanted to become a hardware and software company, so compete with Dell and Microsoft. They would have gotten nowhere. What they did is they offered the cloud. It brought them to trillions of market cap. Actually, Microsoft jumped on the bandwagon and copied them. So we could see the same here, of course, happening too. But fundamentally, again, to summarize this particular episode now, we have a strategic shift. that we expect from Tesla, which is from selling cars to selling transportation, and that's being enabled by Robotaxi. It offers many more opportunities to generate wealth, in particular through software revenue, service revenue, having, you can add a lot more value by having an interior which is designed for these things. So there's a lot of the action space here is opening up dramatically. New types of employees, new types of jobs. An in-car designer that designs, it's like an indoor designer, almost like somebody who designs an office. And we have the whole video game space. We have virtual space. Apple and their thing, the whatever the name is, that mask that they have, which virtual reality. We could see something along those lines too, but let's just stay on the ground for now. We have video games and we have office on wheels. Both are most natural applications of indoor entertainment or indoor time spent, if you will, for people who are consuming transportation while they're using Robotaxi. So lots of opportunity, lots of wealth creation. We have roughly $150 per share for the Robotaxi, but that includes sort of Tesla 1.0. So that is Tesla selling cars and then having a Robotaxi slash FSD offering on top of it. If we go from selling cars to full service on demand, I think we're talking trillions of potential market cap. Of course, it's execution. Of course, it's also things like regulation and political risk have to be taken into account. But as investors, we're excited. This is a very exciting time for us. And that's what matters. The purpose of this podcast series is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. You have to know something and believe in something that nobody else believes in, at least on Wall Street. We believe this is one of those situations. It's probably being discussed between Musk and the board and some key executives. But even most people within Tesla are not still on board. So that is the risk. And maybe Tesla is the wrong company for that. But they have the most necessary ingredient is the technology and the mindset and the ability to iterate around this new strategy, which we believe Tesla is the only company in the world that can execute this. Thank you.